I still can't walk past a cast iron stove without touching the scar above my eyebrow. Most people think it's from a car accident. I usually let them. It's easier than telling them my own father slammed my face into a stove because I refused to finance my sister's beach vacation. The worst part wasn't the blood. It wasn't the pain. It wasn't even my mother's smile. It was the look on my 6-year-old son's face. Fear, pure, helpless fear. He stood frozen in the kitchen, clutching a toy dinosaur, while his grandfather yelled at me like I wasn't his daughter. That look haunted me for years. Even now, when Noah is a grown man, I sometimes remember those tiny hands trembling around that plastic dinosaur, and I wonder how many children learn what love looks like by watching adults destroy it. The whole nightmare started 9 days earlier. My younger sister, Kelsey, called me at work. I almost ignored it. Kelsey never called unless she wanted something. "Hey, sis." She sounded unusually cheerful. "What happened? What makes you think something happened?" "You only use that voice when you're about to ask for money." She laughed. "So, I need a tiny favor?" There it was. I knew it. "It isn't money." "Good. I just need your signature." Silence. "My what?" "My signature." She laughed again. "You'd just be signing a small personal loan." I leaned back in my office chair. "How small?" $25,000. I nearly dropped my coffee. "For what?" "Vacation." I blinked. "What?" She sighed dramatically. "Tyler and I found this amazing 12-day luxury cruise through Greece. Kelsey. They're offering 0 down if someone with good credit signs." "No. You didn't even think about it?" "I did. For almost 3 seconds." She groaned. "You're so selfish. I have a mortgage. You have savings. I have responsibilities." She hung up. I figured that was the end of it. I should have known better. Because in my family, no was treated like the opening offer in a negotiation. The next Sunday was Dad's birthday. Every year Mom insisted on a huge family dinner. Every year I promised myself I wouldn't go. Every year I went anyway. Mostly because Noah adored his grandparents. At least, he used to. When we arrived, the house looked exactly like it had my entire childhood. Same floral curtains, same chipped kitchen table, same cast iron stove Dad refused to replace because, according to him, they don't make them like this anymore. Mom hugged Noah first, then Kelsey. Then me. In that order, nothing new there. Dinner lasted maybe 20 minutes before Dad cleared his throat, so. I knew that tone. Kelsey told us. I sighed. Of course she did. Dad folded his napkin carefully. "You should sign." New Mom smiled. "Sweetheart." Whenever Mom called me sweetheart, disaster followed. "It's family." "No." Dad leaned forward. "You make 6 figures. I also pay my own bills. Kelsey deserves one nice vacation. Kelsey deserves to save for one." The room became quiet. Noah looked up from coloring dinosaurs. "Daddy." He always called me Daddy by accident after hearing his cousin say it. I smiled. "It's okay, buddy." Dad slapped his hand on the table. "You're embarrassing your sister." "I'm protecting my son." Kelsey rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. I won't risk Noah's future for a vacation." Mom actually laughed. Listen to her. As if she's some financial genius. I stood. "We're leaving." Dad stood too. "No." He blocked the kitchen doorway. "You'll sign." "No."
"You owe your family."
"I owe my son." That sentence changed everything. Dad grabbed my arm. Hard. "Dad, sit down." "No." He shoved me backward. I stumbled into the kitchen. Noah screamed. "Daddy." I turned toward my son. And before I could take another step, Dad grabbed the back of my sweater, then slammed my face into the edge of the cast iron stove. The sound echoed through the kitchen. For a second, everything went white. Warm blood ran down my cheek. My ears rang. I tasted metal. Behind me, Noah was crying so hard he couldn't even get words out. Mom looked down at me. Then, she smiled. Not a laugh, not surprise, a smile, and quietly said, "Now you know your place." I looked up at her through blurred vision, and that's when I heard another voice from the front doorway. A calm male voice. "Nobody move." Dad slowly turned around. Standing in the doorway was my next door neighbor, Mr. Whitaker, a retired high school principal who had stopped by to return a casserole dish. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Noah, who had just done something none of us noticed, still crying. My son had picked up my phone from the kitchen floor, and somehow he had activated the emergency call feature. Mr. Whittaker looked down at the screen, then back at my father. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance, and Dad suddenly realized, this time, someone else had heard everything. Nobody moved, not Dad, not Mom, not Kelsey. The only sound in the kitchen was Noah crying. His little dinosaur had fallen onto the tile floor beside him, but he didn't even notice. He just kept staring at the blood running down my face. Daddy. His tiny voice cracked. I made the phone call. I looked at him, confused. What? Whittaker walked over carefully and picked up my phone from the floor. The emergency operator is still connected. I blinked. Noah had accidentally triggered the emergency SOS feature while trying to hand me my phone. The dispatcher had heard everything. Every scream, every threat, every impact. Within seconds, flashing red and blue lights filled the front windows. Dad finally found his voice. This is ridiculous. Mom rushed toward the sink, grabbed a towel, and tried pressing it against my forehead. Sweetheart, let's clean you up before they come inside. I pulled away. No, for the first time in my life, I didn't want peace. I wanted truth. The front door opened. 2 police officers stepped inside. A female officer walked straight toward me. Another stayed near Dad. The woman looked at the blood on my face, then at Noah, then quietly asked, "Who needs medical attention?" Before I could answer, Noah pointed directly at me. "My grandpa hurt my mommy." The room became completely silent. Dad immediately interrupted. She tripped. Officer Ramirez looked at the cast iron stove, then at the blood on its edge. Then back at my father. "You saw her trip." Dad nodded. "Yes!" She wrote something down, and she happened to strike the exact corner of the stove. "Yes." Mom jumped in. "It was just an accident." Officer Ramirez turned toward Noah. She knelt until she was eye level with him. "Can you tell me what happened?" Dad spoke again. "He's just a child." Ramirez didn't even look at him. "I'm asking him." Noah wiped his tears. "My grandpa pushed Mommy." He pointed at the stove. Her head went boom. I closed my eyes. Children don't embellish. They don't use dramatic language. They just tell the truth. Another officer quietly photographed the kitchen. The broken bowl, the blood, the stove, everything. Mr. Whittaker stepped forward. I witnessed the aftermath. Ramirez nodded, and the emergency call recorded the incident. Dad's face lost all color. "What recording?" Mr. Whittaker held up my phone. The dispatcher heard everything. Nobody spoke. The ambulance arrived minutes later. As the paramedic cleaned the cut above my eyebrow, he frowned. "This needs stitches." I nodded. Noah refused to let go of my hand. He climbed onto the ambulance bench beside me and whispered, "I'm sorry." "For what?" I couldn't stop Grandpa. My heart shattered. I kissed his forehead. "You were never supposed to go at the hospital. The emergency physician confirmed I had a concussion and needed several stitches." While I was being treated, a social worker sat with Noah in the waiting room. She handed him crayons and paper. When I came back out, he proudly showed me his drawing. It was our family. Me, him, a big yellow son, no grandparents, no aunt, just us. "I fixed it," he said. I smiled through tears. "What did you fix, family?" The next afternoon, Detective Laura Benson asked me to come to the station. She placed a small speaker on the table. "We've reviewed the emergency call." I looked down. "You don't have to play it?" She nodded. I wasn't planning to. Instead, she handed me a written transcript. One sentence had been highlighted. Dad's voice. "You'll sign even if I have to make you." I stared at those words, then at the next line. The impact. Mom's voice. "Now you know your place." My stomach turned. Laura quietly closed the folder. "Your neighbor's statement matches the recording." I nodded. "And your son's statement matches both." Silence. Then she asked gently, "What do you want to happen?" I thought about revenge. About making them hurt the way they'd hurt me. But when I looked through the interview room window, I saw Noah sitting outside with a victim advocate, still clutching his dinosaur, still watching the door to make sure I came back. And suddenly, I knew exactly what mattered. I want my son to grow up believing this isn't what family looks like. Laura smiled softly. "That's a very different answer. Is it enough?" She nodded. "It's the beginning." Just then, there was a knock on the interview room door. Laura opened it. A man in an expensive gray suit stepped inside carrying a leather briefcase. He looked directly at me. "Ems, Carter. Yes, my name is David Mercer." He set a thick folder on the table. "I think your sister has been lying to your parents." I frowned. "About what?" He slid one photograph across the table. It wasn't a cruise brochure. It was a casino security photo. And Kelsey wasn't on vacation. She was sitting at a high-stakes poker table, 2 weeks before she ever asked me to sign the loan. I stared at the casino photograph for what felt like forever. It was definitely Kelsey. Same leather jacket. Same silver necklace Dad had bought her for Christmas. Same tiny heart tattoo behind her left ear. She wasn't sitting at a slot machine. She was seated at a private poker table. Stacks of chips surrounded her, and according to the timestamp, the picture had been taken 12 days before she asked me to sign the so-called vacation loan. "This isn't a vacation," I whispered. David Mercer nodded. "No." "What is it?" He slid another document toward me. "A debt. I looked up. The vacation story was invented." My stomach turned. Then why tell my parents it was a cruise? Because people are far more willing to rescue someone chasing happiness than someone hiding an addiction. Silence filled the room. David continued. "Your sister has taken out 6 personal loans in the last 18 months. I blinked. 6? 3 credit cards, 2 payday loans, 1 title loan. Every sentence felt heavier than the last, and every one of them has gone into default. I rubbed my forehead. My parents don't know. They know about some, but not all." He opened another folder. "She forged your mother's signature once." "What?" "She also used your father's retirement account as collateral for another loan." I stared at him. "They don't know that either." Detective Benson quietly folded her hands. "Mr. Mercer works for the bank's fraud investigation unit." David nodded. "We've been tracking the pattern for months." I looked down at the paperwork. "No, it was about keeping everything from collapsing." 3 days later, Detective Benson asked everyone to come to the station separately. Dad arrived first. Still angry, still insisting everything had been a misunderstanding, until David placed the documents in front of him, one by one: loan applications, casino withdrawals, security photos, forged signatures. Dad's confidence disappeared with every page. Finally, he whispered, "No." David simply turned another page. Dad stared at Kelsey's signature, then at Mom's forged one, then at mine, or at least an attempt at mine. I leaned closer. "What is this?" David pointed to the document. "She practiced copying your signature." I felt sick. "You mean, if you had continued refusing?" He looked directly at me. "We believe she intended to sign your name herself." The room fell completely silent. Mom covered her mouth. "No." David nodded. "We recovered practice sheets from her apartment." Dad looked like someone had punched him. "This can't be real." "It is." Kelsey arrived an hour later. She walked into the interview room expecting another family argument. Instead, she found evidence covering the entire table. She stopped walking. "What is all this?" Detective Benson answered calmly. "The truth." Kelsey laughed nervously. David interrupted. "No, we understand perfectly." He slid the forged signatures toward her. "Would you like to explain these?" She looked away. Silence. Then another photograph. Her entering a casino. Then another. Meeting with a loan broker. Another. Signing false financial statements. Finally, she stopped pretending. She buried her face in her hands. "I'm tired." Nobody spoke. "I'm so tired." The tears came all at once. I kept thinking one more win would fix everything. She looked at Dad. "I didn't want you to hate me." Dad's voice cracked. "So instead, you destroyed us." She nodded. "I know." The next few months were nothing like television. There wasn't one dramatic speech that solved everything. There were appointments, counseling, financial advisors, support groups, hard conversations, very hard conversations. Dad accepted responsibility for assaulting me. He entered anger, management counseling as part of the legal process, and apologized repeatedly, though rebuilding trust took much longer than saying the words. Mom attended family therapy for the first time in her life. Not because she wanted to. Because she finally realized smiling while someone gets hurt is still participating in the hurt. Kelsey entered a residential treatment program for gambling addiction. She stayed there 4 months, longer than anyone expected. When she came home, she looked different, not happier. Just honest. One afternoon, she came to my house carrying a cardboard box. Noah was playing in the yard. The moment he saw her, he hid behind me. She noticed. And instead of asking for a huggy, she nodded sadly. I understand. She placed the box on my porch. I brought back everything I could sell. Designer handbags, jewelry, electronics. I can't repay everything. She smiled through tears. But I can stop making it worse. I looked at the box, then at her. For the first time in years, she wasn't asking me for anything. She was trying to give something back. Before she left, she crouched down several feet away from Noah. She didn't move any closer. I'm sorry I scared you. He stayed quiet. Then after she walked to her car, he tugged on my sleeve. Mom. Yeah. She didn't ask for money. I smiled. No. That's new. It is. And somehow, that tiny observation from a 6-year-old made me realize something adults often forget. Real change isn't announced, it's noticed. But 2 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail that none of us expected. It wasn't from my parents. It wasn't from Kelsey. It was from Mr. Woodacre. And the first sentence made me cry before I even reached the second line. I think your son helped save more than just you. I opened Mr. Whittaker's letter at my kitchen table after Noah had gone to bed. The handwriting was neat. Exactly the way you'd expect from a man who had spent 35 years grading high school essays. The first line read, I think your son helped save more than just you. I had to stop reading, because I already knew I was going to cry. I folded the page for a second, took a deep breath, and started again. When I arrived at your house that afternoon, I didn't just see a frightened little boy. I saw a child who did exactly what adults hope children will do in an emergency. He didn't freeze forever. He reached for help. Tears blurred the words. Many adults spend their entire lives believing family problems should stay inside the family. Your son didn't believe that. He believed his mother needed help. I looked toward Noah's bedroom. The little dinosaur he carried that day still sat on his nightstand. Mr. Whittaker continued, one day he'll probably wonder if calling for help caused the family to fall apart. If he ever asks, tell him the truth. Families don't fall apart because someone tells the truth. They fall apart because someone keeps hiding it. I quietly folded the letter. It became the most valuable thing I owned. Nearly a year passed. Life wasn't perfect. It was peaceful. And after everything we'd survived, peace felt like a miracle. Kelsey stayed in recovery. Every Tuesday night, every Saturday morning. No excuses. She found a steady bookkeeping job at a local hardware store. The pay wasn't glamorous. She loved it anyway. Every month she mailed me a small check. Sometimes $50, sometimes $100. Never because I demanded it, because she wanted to prove something to herself. I never cashed the first 6. I kept them in a drawer, not as money, as evidence. Evidence that people can choose differently. Dad called every Sunday. For months I let every call go to voicemail. Then one afternoon Noah surprised me. Grandpa sounds sad. He is. Does sad mean bad? I smiled. No. It just means someone knows they hurt somebody. He thought about that for a long time. Then he asked, can sad people get better? Children ask impossible questions. I answered honestly. Sometimes. How? They have to keep choosing better. He nodded like that made perfect sense. Maybe it did. The first time Dad saw Noah again was almost 18 months later. At a community picnic. I hadn't planned it. Neither had he. He stood on the opposite side of the park holding 2 paper plates. The moment Noah noticed him, he stopped walking. Dad didn't move. He didn't call his name. He didn't ask for a hug. He simply set 1 paper plate on an empty picnic table and stepped back. I brought your favorite. Chocolate, chip cookies. Then he waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Noah walked over by himself, picked up 1 cookie, looked at his grandfather, and quietly said, Grandpas aren't supposed to hurt moms. Dad's shoulders started shaking. I know. I'm sorry. No. Dad wiped away tears. I'm sorry. Noah nodded once, then walked back to me. That was enough, not forgiveness. A beginning. Years later, when Noah graduated from high school, something happened that would have seemed impossible after that afternoon in my parents' kitchen. Our entire family sat in the same row. Not because everything had been erased. Because everyone had worked for years to become people who deserved another chance. Kelsey hugged Noah after the ceremony. Dad stayed a respectful distance away until Noah walked over first. Mom cried through the entire event. Afterward, she quietly handed me an old photograph. It was the last family picture taken before everything fell apart. She had written one sentence on the back. Love is not what you demand from your family. Love is what you protect inside your family. She looked at the scar above my eyebrow, the scar she had once watched appear without lifting a finger to stop it. I'll regret that day until my last breath. I believed her, not because regret fixes the past. It doesn't, but because her life after that day never stopped trying to make those words true. As the sun began to set, Noah slipped his hand into mine. Mom. Yeah, remember when Grandpa said family owes family? I do. He smiled. I think he was wrong. I looked at him. What do you think family owes? He thought for a second, then answered with the kind of wisdom only children sometimes have. Safety. I felt tears fill my eyes. Because after everything, after the fear, after the lies, after the broken trust, my son had learned the lesson I spent 30 years trying to understand. Family doesn't owe you money. Family doesn't owe you blind loyalty. Family doesn't owe you silence. Family owes you safety. And if someone asks you to sacrifice that, the bravest word you'll ever learn to say is still the smallest one. No.